Right now, somewhere in northern Tanzania, a Hadza woman is walking back to camp with a basket of food on her head. She is 62 years old. She just walked 8 miles. She dug through hard soil for 3 hours. And she is bringing back more calories than any hunter in her camp will bring back today. For 300,000 years, this is who fed the human species. Not the men with the spears. Not the warriors in the cave paintings. The women. The grandmothers. The aunts. The sisters walking in groups under the morning sun. But almost everything you've been told about ancient women is wrong. The cave wife waiting at home. The fragile mother by the fire. The passive figure in the background of every history book. The truth is stranger, darker, and more powerful than any of that. And it changes what it means to be a woman today. For most of the 20th century, the story of ancient humans was written by men. And the story they told sounded simple. Men hunted. Women waited. It was so accepted that it had its own name, Man the Hunter. A 1966 anthropology conference in Chicago made it official. Men brought home the meat. Civilization was built on the spear. Women, in this story, were almost invisible. They cooked. They raised children. They stayed near the fire. There was just one problem. It was not true. In 1981, anthropologist Frances Dahlberg published a book called Woman the Gatherer. She had been studying real hunter-gatherer societies for years, and the data was impossible to ignore. Among the Kung of the Kalahari, women brought in more than 60% of all calories. Among the Hadza of Tanzania, the same. Among the Ida of the Philippines, the Agda, the Martu of Australia, over and over the same pattern. The men hunted. Sometimes they got lucky. The women fed everyone, every single day. So let's actually walk through a day in the life of an ancient woman. Not the fairy tale, the real one. You wake before the sun. The camp is quiet. Your children sleep beside you. Not in their own room, not in a crib, but pressed against your body the way every human child slept for 300,000 years. Your first task is water. The nearest source is sometimes a mile away. You walk it with other women, your infant tied to your hip in a sling made of hide. You have done this walk so many times your feet know every stone in the path. By mid-morning, you are gathering. You move in a group of 5 or 6 women, ages spanning from teenagers to grandmothers in their 70s. You carry a digging stick. You know by sight, by smell, by the shape of a leaf, which plants are food, which are medicine, which will kill a child in under an hour. This knowledge is not written down. It is in your head. Anthropologist Robert Bailey, who lived with the F in the Congo, estimated that a typical gatherer could identify over 200 edible plants and 80 medicinal ones. By memory, by the time she was 12. You dig, you climb, you strip bark, you crack open nuts. Your 3-year-old plays at your feet with a smaller digging stick, copying every movement you make. This is how she learns. There is no school. There has never been a school. You are the school. By midday, your basket is heavy. You walk back to camp under the sun. And this is when something happens that almost no history book talks about. The walk back is where the women talk. Anthropologist Megan Biesel spent decades with the Jew/Hoansi people of southern Africa. She noticed that the long walks between gathering sites and camp were the most important hours of the day. Not for food, but for information. Who was sick? Who was pregnant? Who had been unkind to a child? Which man was thinking about leaving his wife? Which young woman was ready for marriage? The women's gathering circle was the camp's nervous system. And here is what almost no one writes about ancient women. They had power. In most hunter-gatherer societies, women chose their own husbands. They could leave them. They controlled the food they brought in, and food was the camp's real currency, not meat. Among the Kung, if a woman wanted to divorce her husband, she simply put his belongings outside the hut. That was it. It was done. A Hadza woman, when asked by an anthropologist if she would like to marry a wealthy outsider, laughed. Why would I want a husband who is not here every night? The story we were told, of weak women being protected by strong men, was not the human story. It was a much newer story. It started with agriculture, with ownership, with walls. For 95% of human history, women were not protected. They were powerful. But here is where the story gets harder. Because ancient women also bore something that modern women rarely have to face. The child mortality rate in hunter-gatherer societies is around 40%. For out of every 10 children died before the age of 5. This was not unusual. This was every mother's life. Anthropologist Sarah Blaffer, Hrdy, spent her career studying motherhood across species and cultures. She found that ancient mothers developed something modern psychology has only recently begun to understand: a kind of strategic, protective love. Not less love, but a love that had to function in a world where loss was constant. This is why, in almost every hunter-gatherer society on Earth, no woman raises her child alone. The word for it is alamothering. Aunts, grandmothers, older siblings, cousins. Every child has many caregivers. Hrdy argues that humans literally could not have survived as a species if mothers raised children alone. You read that correctly. The nuclear family, one mother, one father, isolated in a house with their kids, is one of the most recent and most unnatural living arrangements in human history. Your nervous system was not built for it. If you are a mother today, alone in a house, exhausted, wondering why this feels impossible, it's because it is. You are doing the work of 5 women, by yourself. And then there were the grandmothers. In 1997, anthropologist Kristen Hawkes proposed something that overturned decades of evolutionary biology. She called it the grandmother hypothesis. Human women are the only female mammals on Earth that live for decades after they stop being able to have children. Almost no other species does this. Female chimps die shortly after their fertility ends. Same with elephants. Same with whales, with one exception, the orca, who also has grandmothers. So why do human women live so long after menopause? Hawkes found the answer among the Hadza. The most productive food gatherers in the entire camp were not the young mothers. They were the women in their 60s and 70s. Grandmothers brought back more food per day than any other group, and they used it to feed their grandchildren. This extra food meant grandchildren survived. Mothers could have more children sooner. The species grew. In other words, humans only became humans because of grandmothers. The single most important evolutionary force in the rise of our species was not the spear. It was a 65-year-old woman with a digging stick. So what did ancient women actually do all day? They fed the species. They held the knowledge. They chose their own lives. They raised children together, not alone. They walked. They talked. They mourned. They survived. And when their fertile years ended, they did not retreat. They became the most powerful force in the camp. Then, about 10,000 years ago, we invented agriculture. We invented fences. We invented ownership. The wild fields became someone's property. The animals became someone's livestock. And slowly, somewhere along the way, women became someone's too. The grandmother stopped being the food bringer. She became the babysitter. The gatherer stopped being a provider. She became a dependent. The wide circle of mothers and aunts shrank into a single woman, alone in a house, exhausted by a job that used to be done by 10 people. We did not lose our strength. We lost our circle. If you are a woman today, and you feel tired in a way that sleep does not fix, there is nothing wrong with you. You are carrying a load your ancestors would have refused to carry alone. They would have looked at your life and asked the same question the Hadza woman asked the anthropologist. Why are you doing this by yourself? For 300,000 years, no woman ever had to. And somewhere deep inside you, your body still remembers what it was like to walk with the others.